morning and welcome to Lifestyle Gardening. I'm Kim Todd and we've got another great program for you as we take a look at disease problems with roses, landscape plants with winter interest, and we'll talk to Jonathan Larson about spiders. But to start our show, we're going to hear from Jeff Culbertson about repairing the weak spots in your lawn with sod. Here's Jeff to tell us more.
Well, it's the middle of October and we're kind of at the end of our turf establishment season. It's too late for seeding right now. We're worried about frost and cold weather and dry, so we're doing some sodding to fix some turf repair areas or fix some parts of campus here. So we've brought in sod from Todd Valley Farms near Utan, and we're getting it established here. This is a fescue sod. So one thing you'll notice if you purchase sod, you generally have two choices. Bluegrass and fescue, and the advantage to each is, one, with the bluegrass, because of its rhizomatous nature, it holds together much better when you're laying the sod, and maybe a little easier for those that put the sod in. With fescue, for us here, for our growing conditions, we find it works very well for us. Again, it's a little bit more difficult to lay, but we don't seem to have too many problems with it. We're able to get this area laid pretty quickly here, just within a matter of 45 minutes or so. So it goes pretty fast. One of the things that we'll do, again, when you're doing sod, especially along curbs or sidewalks, is you want to make sure that you've dropped the soil level down about the same level as the thickness of the sod. So depending on the sod that you purchase, and they should be able to tell you about how thick that they cut it, you'll be able to grade that area so you drop it down so you're at the right height when you lay the sod down. And then once we bring it in, we'll fertilize this, and then we'll make sure that we keep it water. We don't want to overdo it, but we want to keep it moist as we go through the fall. It's important, our falls can be pretty dry, so it's important that you continue to water as you go through the fall. If you have some warm days through the winter, it wouldn't hurt to go out and give it a little bit of a drink, especially if it's been a dry winter. One of the reasons that we've decided to sod right now is the time of year. So seed works well probably before the middle of September. After that, depending on the weather conditions, it gets a little sketchy as far as making sure that you get a good germination rate and that it's well established before we go into cold weather. So one of the advantages to sod is we can get this established pretty quickly. We're less concerned about winter kill going into the winter. So when the sod comes, it usually comes in a roll. It's going to be about 4 feet high, and in the middle will be this plastic tube. We use a forklift to move it around, and that way it keeps it together. And then when they cut it, they have this netting that kind of knits the whole thing together that holds it. As we roll up the slabs, it comes in a slab cut about 21 inches by 3 feet long. We roll it up, remove this plastic netting. You wouldn't have to remove it, but we do. And then we unroll it as we take it out to the area. So this makes it very handy. While it's connected to the roll, it's very stable. We might have a roll that we're going to keep overnight. We just wet it down and hold it till the morning and prep another site. So we usually get a good 24 hours out of a roll before we have to have it all out, especially this time of year when it's a little cooler. In the summertime, when it's warmer, you worry about mildew and that sort of issue drying out too quickly. So if it is warmer weather, you want to make sure that you have enough square footage prepped to be able to lay the sod all at one time and not hold it overnight. So after we have it all established, you can rent a large metal roller. You fill it full of water and you can take that out, and that'll help with the seams, help level things up and even things up and knit those seams together. It's important when you're laying the sod that you kind of pull it together and make sure the seams are touching. I like to walk the seams after I'm done to make sure that we have a good connection. As you go through the winter, if it's dry, make sure you go out and give it a drink through the winter. In the spring, you should pretty quickly see this knit together. It really should be very solid, well established, by the first part of April. As things warm up in the spring, this turf will start growing, the roots are growing through the winter, especially in sunnier, warmer spots. So it will get itself established really as we go through the winter.
As Jeff said, the benefits of sodding over seeding include the quick establishment and weed problems aren't quite as prominent. As long as you choose one of the improved varieties and you get it installed correctly, you should be enjoying a nice green lawn in no time. Earlier this year, we gave you an introduction to roses, and we featured how to control insect pests as well. Of course, bugs aren't the only problem you'll be faced with in your rose beds. You're also likely to have some issues with diseases. Here to help us identify rose diseases and give us some practical solutions is Kevin Corris.
Today we're going to be talking about 4 common diseases of roses, 3 of which are fungi and 1 of which is a virus. These diseases are common in Nebraska and most of the United States where we can grow roses. Unfortunately, we can find these diseases. The first disease I'd like to talk about today is called black spot of rose. And as the name implies, the symptoms of this disease occur as black spots on the leaves and sometimes on the stems. The black spots can start either on the lower leaves or on the upper leaves. This disease is favored by really moist conditions, so high humidity and a lot of rainfall. The fungus needs standing water on the leaves to be able to infect. It's a residue-borne disease, which means that it's going to survive our winters in plant debris. So one of our best control methods for this particular disease is sanitation. So if you do see those black spots on your leaves or on your canes, you want to go ahead and remove them so that that fungus isn't present again. It's the winter time, so it's a good time to go out there right now and do some of this sanitation and remove these diseased canes and some of the foliage that may have fallen to the ground to prevent those fungi from infecting again the next year. So that's black spot of rose. The second disease I'd like to talk about is rose rust. And rose rust is a very vivid disease. It's very easy to diagnose because it creates these bright orange pustules on the leaves, on the petioles, and on the stems. This again is a fungal disease and can overwinter here in Nebraska in the leaves and infected debris. So again, when thinking about management of rose rust, sanitation is key. So remove those diseased canes in the winter and early spring before the temperatures rise and we get a lot of moisture. The third disease I'd like to talk about is powdery mildew. And again, this is a fungal disease. And as the name implies, the symptoms are a powdery mildew that's formed on the leaf surface, on the upper leaf surface. And that powdery mildew is white in color. This disease is again favored by high humidity and can start anywhere on the plant, the upper leaves or the lower leaves. As long as there's high humidity, the fungus can form, unfortunately. So for all 3 of these diseases, which are fungal and attack the foliage, management is removal of the residue in the winter and in the spring before the weather increases in temperature and we get a lot of moisture. Also, for all 3 of these diseases, there are preventative fungicides that can be applied before the onset of the disease to help prevent it. So if you are in a situation where you have had history of this disease, you may want to think about a foliar fungicide application for black spot, rose rust, or powdery mildew. The fourth disease I'd like to talk about is rose rosette. And rose rosette is actually caused by a virus that's vectored around by a tiny little insect called the Aryphiid mite. Rose rosette is defined, the symptoms are defined by tiny bunches of red leaves that never expand into a fully developed leaf and never turn green. Also, you might see a random cane here or there that has prolific thorning, more thorning than you would normally see on a rose plant. And those are all good indications of rose rosette virus. There isn't a whole lot you can do if you have rose rosette. What you need to do is just remove that entire plant from the area. The thing with rose rosette, however, is that if you want to plant another rose bush in that same location, that's fine. The virus will not survive in those conditions, but it may come in on another Aryphiid mite later on in the lifetime of that rose bush. So the best way to manage these diseases is to be on the lookout to make sure that you don't have any of the black spot pustules or the rose rust pustules or white powdery substance or profuse caning with profuse thorning on your bushes. Be out there, scout, make sure you don't have any of these diseases. And if you do, some of our best management strategies are just to go ahead and remove that material from the environment to help reduce the amount of disease. There are also resistant rose varieties out there for all 4 of these diseases.
Your best bet to control rose diseases is to not start with the problem in the first place. If you make the extra effort to select and plant disease-resistant varieties, you'll spend more time enjoying your roses, less time fixing the problems. That's true no matter what you plant in your garden. Although many of us would like to deny it, spiders are a part of our everyday lives. We understand there are a lot of people who are deathly afraid of spiders, but it's a good thing they're here because they prey upon a lot of the insect pests we talk about that cause problems elsewhere in our homes and gardens. We recently sat down with Extension entomologist Jonathan Larson to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly spiders. It's my pleasure to have Jonathan Larson on air today to talk about a subject that is not my pleasure, but it was my idea, and that is spiders. Jonathan, welcome. I think our viewing audience for Backyard Farmer knows that spiders are just not my deal. So to have you talk about them, maybe that will also help some of our other audience members get over a little bit of the fear of spiders. Okay, Jonathan, so what really is the difference between spiders and all sorts of other insects, bugs, cockroaches, whatever? What's the difference?
Sure, absolutely. So they're all part of a big group that we call arthropods or arthropoda. And this is sort of the big group that they all dwell in, things like insects and spiders. Insects are off in their own little nook and cranny that we call insecta, while arachnids, the spiders, the scorpions, the ticks and mites, they're over in their own little group. And the main difference in terms of body plan is going to be that arthropods that are arachnids are going to have 2 body segments. They have a cephalothorax in the front and then an abdomen in the back. And they have 8 legs. They have 4 pairs of legs, 4 on each side.
There are people, Jonathan, myself among them, who have something called arachnophobia. Why is that? What is it about spiders that just sends people over the roof?
That's a really great question, and one that I've always been really fascinated by. I do a lot of talks about spiders. I chat with a lot of folks about spiders, and I always get that reaction. There's always a very visceral first reaction of gross or ew or let me run away from you right now while we talk about this. And I always try to ask people what it is about spiders that bothers them. And arachnophobia, that's a true psychological syndrome. I mean, that's something you need to get some help with probably. But for other folks, it's just a creepy thing, right? They talk about spiders move too quickly for them. They pop up out of weird spots. It's the fact that they have too many eyes or too many legs that freaks them out. They're hairy. And then really the venom, that's the thing that gets to a lot of people, is this idea that spiders are somehow inherently dangerous, that they're looking to bite you and that they'll inject you with this powerful poison that's going to harm you in some way. But the truth is that spiders are really keystone predators out in our ecosystems. We want spiders around. I know that's hard for you to agree with possibly, but they do so many good things out in the environment. Without spiders, you'd see a huge upswing in things like mosquitoes that are biting you, other pests, maybe things that are attacking your garden. If you don't have these keystone predators around, things can really fall apart. So we need to sing their praises a little more, give them a little more confidence.
We get a lot of questions during the season, Jonathan, about especially brown recluse spiders in the southeastern corner of the state. People are pretty wigged out about the idea that a dinky little thing like that could bite them and potentially kill them. What are the poisonous spider issues in Nebraska?
There's really just 2 spiders here in North America that we worry about, and that's the brown recluse and the black widow, the 2 famous spiders. The black widow, very classic looking spider. Everybody knows what she looks like. She's dark jet black with that red hourglass on her abdomen, about 1.5 inches in length. And they have a neurotoxin. It plays on your neurons. It plays tap dance up there. And it can kind of give you these nasty flu-like symptoms. But in terms of fatalities, the studies that I've read about have shown that we really haven't seen anybody die from a black widow bite in the last decade or so. It's happened in the past, but only with the very young and the old and the infirm. The other one, the brown recluse, that's one that really scares a lot of people. People think about that as this spider that's going to melt off part of their flesh, and it does have a necrotic venom. It usually results in a small divot in your skin, and you start to itch that and you introduce things like MRSA or other bacteria or fungal pathogens into the wound, and then that's when things can get really gross. But the fact of the matter is brown recluse bites are really rare. The brown recluse is not a nationwide insect here in the US. It only dwells in sort of the central corridor of the United States up until about southern Nebraska. It doesn't get much further north than that. It doesn't live in places like California or the East Coast. And if you encounter it, it's more likely to run away from you than it is to bite you. But if it does bite you, you can seek medical help and they'll be able to clean that wound out for you and you won't have to worry about it.
Okay, so those of us who would really prefer to not share our domain with spiders, the control methods that come to mind are a good boot, a nice fly swatter, running, screaming, or a sticky trap. What do you recommend in terms of people getting rid of them or maybe even keeping them out to begin with?
Well, I think you talked a little bit about them. We've got fly swatters and your boot, your shoe. You can just squish these organisms. They're not going to get away from you very quickly. If you really want to prevent them from coming in or you want to prevent them from moving around, things like glue traps that you can buy at a gardening store, they do crawl up on those commonly, particularly if you put them near the wall, near the baseboard. They like to follow those lines. And so if you get up close to those areas, you'll see that you capture most of them. If you wanted to spray something, you can use exterior insecticides, things like Ortho Home Defense, that is registered for use against spiders. A 3-foot band of that around your home would prevent them from entering for a few weeks in the fall if you were really worried about it. But mostly, you don't really have to worry about them too much trying to get in. They don't last too long once they're inside. They usually run out of food and water and they die elsewhere. But if you do want to prevent them, those are the tactics I would use.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks for giving us that information. I'm sure that gardeners who are not afraid of spiders, or the ones who are a little bit afraid, will be looking at them a bit differently in their gardens this season.
Hopefully so. Thanks for having me on.
Arachnophobia isn't a laughing matter for people who are truly afraid of spiders. But for the most part in Nebraska, they are harmless. And with what we just heard, we hope you'll come to the understanding that they are actually a beneficial part of nature's wondrous pageantry. We know our audience loves growing things. There's a lot of satisfaction watching something you've planted and cared for produce fruit, vegetables, or bloom into flowers. During the cold winter months, we usually are encouraging you to make plans for the next growing season or purchasing your seeds. Well, you can make looking out of your windows in the winter a little less dreary when you consider what plants give us the gift of a little winter interest. That's the topic of this week's landscape lesson. The incredible colors of late fall might seem like a funny time to talk about winter interest in the landscape, but it is exactly perfect timing. As those leaves drop, one of the most important aspects of winter interest in the landscape reveals itself, and that is the form and the texture of many of our plants. Some of the trees become skeletal, and you can see what was a plant that disappeared into green foliage. You can see the twigs, you can see the buds, you can see the remaining seed pods on the trees and shrubs. Of course, we always think about evergreens when we think about winter interest, and they certainly have a great place to play. They're sort of that stable element, really changing not at all during the growing season, unless of course they're dead, and nobody wants a dead evergreen. But you get forms, you get shapes, and against those, the changing of the season allows such things as the grasses of the winter to stand. You can leave the seed head standing. You can take a look at some of the perennials that actually have what we call evergray foliage, or perhaps the seed heads of coneflowers, or the deep, deep, dark, blackish pods of our native Baptisia will be plants that will give you interest throughout almost all of the entire winter. Of course, we think about color as well. Red stands out starkly, whether it's red twig dogwood. Perhaps you have the bud of a red rose that just couldn't quite let go for the winter months. Maybe it's the berries on certain trees or shrubs that will stay through the winter months. So one of the things for you to think about in planning for winter interest is take a look at the landscape, not during the winter itself, but look at it during the spring, during the summer, as you're choosing plants. If you're replacing plants or you're starting anew in a landscape, think about what you're actually after. Do you want to be able to see winter landscapes out your window? Do you want to be able to walk through them on your way from one point on your property to another? Do you want to be able to attract the birds and watch them as they pluck away at those berries. As importantly as any of that, you want to think about which seed heads you want to allow to stand during the winter months. One of the problems with winter interest can be you get all those marauding critters that will come in, dig, burrow, bury, and make their nests and their homes under those seed heads. So take a look at it, decide what gets to stay and what gets to go. Think a little bit messier than typical, and don't be quite so tidy in your fall landscape if you really want to see beautiful winter interest. It takes a little extra planning and a lot less cleanup in the fall to create something worth looking at when the snows come. Hardy woody shrubs make wonderful mounds of drifted snow. Tall ornamental grasses can offer those panicles blowing in the wind, and even some tall wildflower seed heads are really nice when they're popping out of the snowdrifts. It's up to your imagination as to what you clean up or save for those snowy days. Let's take a few minutes now to answer our viewer emails. We'd love to hear from you, and perhaps you can share a picture or two with us. Just send those to byf@unl.edu as an email with an attachment for the picture. Our first question actually comes from way south. This is a viewer from Texas, and it is a question about pecans. We can grow pecans here in Nebraska. In fact, we have on East Campus the Northern Pecan Research, which is pretty cool. We also have Heartland Nuts and More, which actually takes care of those nuts and offers them up to us to eat. But they are a tree that in the southern parts of the country is pretty rapidly growing and very well known. It's actually the state tree in Texas. She has about 3 to 4-year-old pecan trees and is very disappointed in how they are producing. First off, we're thinking that they are probably pretty young. Sometimes you might get a little bit of production of nuts to begin with, and then the trees just don't have enough oomph left to be able to do much every single year. The other thing that we're really wondering about is whether they need to be cross-pollinated. And pecans are self-fruitful, and there probably are likely some native trees in that particular area, but depending on the variety or the cultivar, the possibility of them flowering at the same time may or may not be happening. And so you could be catching the tail end of pollination with one variety and the beginning with another one, and that's resulting in a crop that is really not very long lasting. So we would say a couple of things. First off, make sure that you're taking care of those trees properly. Second, have a little bit of patience with them. And third, do test the varieties or take a look at the varieties you've chosen and see if you can figure out if they are flowering at the right time to be able to pollinate one another. And then enjoy those pecans, especially if you don't have squirrels that are going to be getting them. We are quickly running out of time for today's show. Before we go, we want to highlight the new turf research plots on UNL's East Campus. This past season, our turfgrass specialist Bill Kreuzer was busy setting up these plots on campus to study turf varieties, water requirements, and disease and insect pests. It's a great example of what your university is doing to help improve the lawns of Nebraska gardeners by researching water conservation and looking for ways to decrease pesticide usage. Here's Bill to tell us more.
Welcome to the new Backyard Farmer Turfgrass Garden and Turf Research Center here on East Campus in Lincoln, Nebraska. We're really excited to have this new facility right here on campus. It's a great way to do turfgrass research, engage our students in teaching, and to engage the community with extension activities. This is a new research and extension site for us. It was installed in the fall of 2014, and we're continuing to expand. And we have a bunch of different displays here, looking at different weeds, different lawn varieties, informational signs. And then we also have research plots where we're studying things like when's the optimum time to put fertilizer down on a lawn, and how should we maintain a creeping bentgrass golf fairway or golf green. We have some sports turf research. And then as part of the university's efforts to improve water use efficiency and reduce water requirements, we have a big acre of small irrigation plots so we can do some drought research across a variety of turfgrass species to really achieve the university's mission. It's really exciting to have this new facility here, and we have a research facility up in Mead, Nebraska, and we're moving things on here. One benefit is it's nice and close to campus, so we can engage our students and the community in the latest turfgrass research. And also from a research perspective, we have now moved to really small irrigation zones, and so we can have a lot more control on our different irrigation treatments out here to really understand and figure out how to irrigate our turfgrass. Some other things we're doing out here is looking at management of buffalo grass at Gulf fairway height, but then also how do we manage buffalo grass mowing and fertility and shade tolerance at a lawn height. So that's interesting to us. We have a lot of amenity grasses and grasses you may not use frequently from a lawn, and we're testing out those type of grass species under lawn type of environments. So the Backyard Farmer Turf Garden is open to the public. We have informational signs where they can learn about weed ID and control, how to fertilize and irrigate properly, how they should do mowing. They can learn about some of the different grass species and then see them on 10 by 10 plots. So you can really look at an older variety of tall fescue versus a newer variety of tall fescue. In zoysia grass that might look really great in the summertime and then see how it goes dormant and struggles through the winter. So a lot of things that we talk about on Backyard Farmer, the public can come at any time and look at those plots and really see what we're talking about on the show. So in the future, now that we're located in Lincoln, we'd like to really have homeowner field days where we'll invite the general public in on a weekend, and they can come and interact with the turf scientists and our graduate students and see some interesting research that they can bring back to their lawns to do a better job of managing their turf grass. And so looking forward to being able to host those in 2016, in addition to our normal professional turfgrass manager field day that we'll host in July. So we're moving things from Mead right down to where our clientele is, and that's right here in Lincoln.
In addition to going to the dairy store, that's another good reason to come out to East Campus for a visit. You can look at all the beautiful trees and shrubs in Maxwell Arboretum, the Yiter Garden with all of its great wildflowers. You can stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and now the Backyard Farmer Turf Research plots. Make it a point to visit us when the weather warms up. Thank you so much for joining us again for Lifestyle Gardening. Next time we'll be featuring a few segments on raised bed construction and installation, and we'll also be hearing about peppers and dry edible beans. So good morning, good gardening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time on Lifestyle Gardening.